Chrystal Hurst is an energetic, fun-loving girl next door who loves encouraging others to fulfill their full potential in Christ. She is the best-selling author of She's Still There and co-authored Kingdom Woman with her father, Dr. Tony Evans. Chrystal reaches audiences through conferences, writing for Proverbs 31 Ministries, teaching and leading women at her home church, and sharing regular encouragement via podcasts and blogs at ChrystalEvansHurst.com. Please give a warm welcome to Chrystal Evans Hurst.
Good afternoon. It is my privilege, my pleasure to be with you today, to see you and see a room full of people here for such a great purpose. I'm very grateful for the invite and the opportunity. Had an opportunity to talk to President and CEO Roland Warren and get to know a little bit more about his story and more about the organization and what you are all about. And it is so very important. The heart, the ministry, your passion, whatever has brought you, we know God has called you, but whatever the life circumstances are that led you to be a part of this organization and then to make time in your schedule to be here today, it is for such a time as this. And we know that we are living in times that are not necessarily easy. In fact, for many of us, the last few months, 18 months have been really hard. And that has made, I'm sure, in many of the ways that you work and serve, has made it even more difficult and harder to do what was already not easy. But what we know is that many things that God has called us to do are not easy, but they are essential. And it is especially in those seasons of God calling you to do essential activities, essential tasks and communication and connection with people who need you, who need your gifting, who need your heart, who need your compassion, that we all have to pause and to receive encouragement. The best place to receive that encouragement is from God himself, because if he called you, then he can sustain you, even when you don't think you have the energy or the ability to continue. But it is at events like this, at opportunities that you have to gather with people who share your passion, who share your calling, who share your heart, and your hearts beat with the same rhythm for a purpose, that you especially get the encouragement that happens in community. One of the reasons why God tells us in his word not to forsake the assembling of yourselves together as it relates to our role in the local church is because God knew that the journey in following Jesus is not one that you're supposed to do on your own. Community of faith matters. But I want to take that a step further, if I might, and say when you are walking as a part of the body to do on behalf of the love of God for other people in our community who need our help and our support, being banded together with other people who share your beliefs, who share your calling, and who share your passion, not forsaking that assembly matters too, where you are able to say, how's your year? How's your center? How's your heart? What is your issue? What are your challenges where you can learn from one another and be stronger because you're knit together deep in the soul? It is my pleasure to be with you today because I am so very honored about what you are doing and to be a part of that today, but also because I understand on many levels why this matters. Our own church in Dallas, Texas, I attend my father's church. It has been on his heart for many years. It had been on his heart for many years to have a pregnancy center in our community, which we he did start that, and we still do. And it is something that I've been able to watch and be a part of over the years, to hear the stories, to know who's come through and how the family of those children, the mom and the dad, how family has been built where no family would have even existed at all because of people's commitment to share the love of Jesus and to give practical information, education, and support so that you're not telling women what they should do without giving them a how-to. The how-to matters. So I'm really grateful to you for being here today. One of the things I know for sure is that often The best times come out of the hardest times. We are in Texas, and regardless of where you are from, you probably heard about the Texas freeze. Now, we in Texas don't do freezes for real. Not for real, for real. Now, we'll do cold and crazy, Texas is a little crazy and schizophrenic with its weather sometimes. It could be 72 degrees on Christmas Eve and then 49 degrees on Christmas Day. We have a little back and forth often with our weather. We're used to that. We're used to ridiculously hot summers, and because we don't know how to drive on ice, we just need a little bit to shut the whole thing down. Trust me, I spent many a day as a elementary, junior high, high school kid grateful when there was a little bit of mist and the temperature dropped just below 32. Hallelujah, we don't have to go anywhere tomorrow. But real cold, real freeze, we don't do that. Our lives are not built for that. Our work is not built for that. And our houses are definitely not built for that. I stand here before you as a woman whose home still has holes in it. In the wall, I can see the copper pipes, and I'm constantly telling the children, quit hitting that with a fork, it's not a toy. I also have wood floors that are buckling, and we're waiting on replacement because not only are our homes not built for that, but our insurance companies weren't prepared for that either. Contractors are backed up beyond belief, and I'm still waiting. But here's what I can tell you. After days of freezing temperatures and lots of time in my home with my children who were not prepared for that kind of cold either, the best of times often occur during the hardest times. During that Texas storm, we lost power and heat. And there were a lot of parts of that were very uncomfortable. My children were cold. We couldn't get out of the house. We were stuck with whatever we had to cook. And during those times, in the miserableness of freezing cold, house temperatures that were below 50 degrees, I know, it was difficult. Here's what also occurred. Cuddling up to stay warm with 3 teenage boys who normally would be not caught dead, rolling up in a blanket next to their mother, but I enjoyed that. Reading The Hobbit again, but by flashlights or by the light of the fire, because we didn't have power and we don't have gas, it's all electric in our home. Roasting hot dogs in the fireplace was an adventure. And the best yet, if you can make a s'more sandwiched instead of graham crackers with an Oreo, that'll be the best s'more you ever had. And not having graham crackers in the midst of the storm was a great opportunity for me to discover that Oreos are better anyway. The best of times often result, the best things often come out of the hardest times. I remember in my 20s when I had a job I hated, and after getting out of college and living my best life with no real responsibility and with a lot of fun opportunity to manage my own schedule and have summers and long vacations, and then you get that first real job where you have 5 days of paid time off, and I thought, this can't be life, indeed. I remember thinking, this can't be it. I literally, as I drove through the tollway in Dallas, Texas, prayed out loud, Lord, I'd need more time off. Now, I don't know how else to get that other than being sick. So, I don't want you to kill me. I don't want any life-threatening disease. But if I can get into a minor car accident that will allow me to have to be hospitalized and to take advantage of short-term or maybe even long-term disability, I'll take that. I remember in the middle of the night in my 30s, in that season of my life as a stay-at-home mom, thinking in the middle of the night when my middle son decided that he didn't want to wear his diaper. And so he took it off and created a horrible mess for me to clean up. Lord Jesus, what can I do to escape this season too? Surely this is not what I intended to sign up for. Don't you know I used to get paid? I had a job title. I had a check, and now menial, manual, nasty labor is my lot in life? You've got to be kidding me. And then in my 40s, when in a season of our marriage, my husband dealt with some really difficult health challenges. He was unable to earn income, and I had been home for 10 years and was trying to figure out, what do I do now? When someone came up to me and said, "Girl, how did you do it?" And I said, "Do what?" She said, "I've known you for almost 30 years, and I've seen you walk through the seasons of your life. And I've seen God through you, buoy you every single time. Tell me, what is it that you've learned?" And I actually had the opportunity through a series of circumstances to write a book called She's Still There. And I went back to the 20s story of what I learned during the difficult season of not really being in a place of passion. And I went back to the season in my 30s of wondering if no one sees me or no one calls me or no one notices me or I'm not doing anything that society tells me is of value. How did I buoy through that season through what God said about me instead? And in my 40s, when there weren't any practical answers to really hard life challenges, and for real, it was time to adult, I went back to each of those difficult times and shared what I'd learned. And so when a woman comes up to me and says, "Thank you for allowing the worst of times to allow me to understand how those really hard times can still be the best of times because God is showing me what it looks like for him to use those difficulties and cause me to grow," I realized that all throughout those decades, the best times, the best results often come from the hardest times if you'll be faithful to live through them. My oldest child is 30. I don't know how that's possible because I'm still 27. But she is. She is married and has 3 children, which means I'm also a grandmother. I don't even understand how that's possible either, but it's true. That 30-year-old was born to me when I was 19, my second year of college, first semester of my sophomore year. I gave birth to my first child out of wedlock. Great family, great support system. And because I'm a little bit of an achiever, it never occurred to me to do anything else with my child other than to have her and to keep her with me. So if you back up past my 20s and ask me, "Chrystal, how did you make it through college in 4 years with a little one in tow?" I actually can't answer that question for you. Now when I look back on it, I think, how did you do that? Maintain your GPA and graduate, and grace of God. Here's what I can tell you. It doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. It doesn't mean that it wasn't difficult to work 25 hours a week, to take a full scheduled load and to figure out how to have that little one in tow. But here's what I also remember. I remember a little one, 1.5, 2 years old, sitting on my sofa, watching Barney for the 97th time, because she didn't want to go to sleep if I wasn't going to sleep. And so my memories of being in my early 20s are also lovingly littered with a little one who was studying Barney while I studied biology. And then when I was ready to go to bed, she came to bed with me and we cuddled together. And the best times often are born in the hardest times. And here I am on my way into yet another decade. And so when I see a young woman struggling with the decision of life, my perspective allows me to say that to her with confidence. Not only do I have my 40s and my 30s and my 20s, but I too, as a teen, have a story to tell you. And what I know is that there are women of all ages and all seasons and all walks of life who need to know from you the best times, the best stories, the best experiences, the best opportunities often come from walking faithfully through the hardest times, making the hard decisions to do the right thing for the right reasons, even in ridiculously hard seasons. And I know that you too are sharing with women. I know that you can't see. I know that there's a list of reasons why you might want to make a decision to not walk through what is a really hard, brave thing to do. But I want to give you an opportunity to see the perspective that I have, whether it's your personal story or whether it's your experience from walking or working in this way with women over time, that you have a different perspective, and that perspective can change a woman's decision with a perspective she does not have. The sharing of our stories, me telling my children later, listen, that time that we lost power and lost light, wasn't that a good time? And with time and perspective, they'll remember that lovingly, because I know that there were moments in our upbringing growing up where they weren't fun in the middle of it, but looking back, it was good times. You will teach them as they come through your centers and sit with you for counseling and take your classes. Listen, I know you can't see it right now, but even during this hard time, I need you to know that some of the best times of your life will be born in these difficult seasons. And for many of you who have your own story, the decision you did make or the decision you did not make, you have the perspective that the best stuff of life often is born in the hardest decisions in life that we will ever make. Light shines in darkness. If there is no darkness, if there is no hardship, then light actually doesn't do what it's supposed to do. You, as the light in the center, the light in the community, the light with that one person who is listening attentively to your wisdom, it does its best work in the dark. You do your best work when things are hardest. Your light shines the brightest when the environment or the situations that you're facing seem insurmountable. When the bills for the centers are struggling to be paid, when a volunteer doesn't show up, when you are having yet another meeting with someone who you want to invest their time, energy, resources, their talent in your organization or in your community, and you don't get the response you were hoping for, or the returned email or the phone call. Showing up consistently as your best for what God has called you to do, being faithful to the passion and the calling that He's put in your heart, is how your light shines in the middle of the darkness or hardship that you personally are facing. And all I can tell you is the perspective of what you will see 5 years from now, a decade from now, 20 years from now, 6 months from now. The perseverance of showing up with this little light of yours is what will give you perspective in hindsight. So as I stand here before you today, I just want to give you a little perspective to encourage you to keep holding up your light and doing what God has already called you to do, knowing that with time, our perspective can shift. My daughter, when she was that oldest girl, because there are 5 of them now, I got started and then I decided, my husband and I, when we got married, we each gave each other the gift of a girl on our wedding day, and then we added 3 boys after that. And let me just say, boys are different than girls. My oldest daughter is a seamstress. She's a creative. She actually makes her living, her and her husband together, as a photography business. She shoots weddings. But she's always been very creative, and when she was a teenager, she was learning how to sew and decided she wanted to sew her prom dress. And, as a mother, I wanted to be supportive, but I was thinking, when people sew, there's the sewing that is great because you can't do it, but you can still look at it and know that it was homemade. You know what I'm saying? And then there's the sewing that somebody can do and that's professional. You wouldn't know the difference. Well, my daughter was still in the first category. So when she told me she was going to make her dress, I wanted to be supportive, and I said, okay, that's great. And I was thinking, whoa, Lord, something's going to go wrong. I know something's going to go wrong. She had made 3 other dresses for galas and proms, and this was her senior year, and she wanted to go out with a strong bang. She wanted it to be perfect. She'd gotten a serger so her edges would be seamless and look store-bought. She had bought tags so she could put her own tag in the back and make it official. The evening came for her to go to her prom. She was so excited. We were excited. It's the first kid, so everybody comes over. I'm serving hors d'oeuvres, the whole 9 yards. She gets her makeup done. And then it's time to put on the dress. She goes upstairs. Her date arrives. His family shows up as well, because this is what you do when it's your first children. And the last thing for her to do, after all of the accoutrements had been accomplished, was to put on the dress. She made the dress for herself, so it fit her, borderline too tight, but I wouldn't allow that. But she made sure it fit, so she had to shimmy in it. And as she got in it, and then my job as the mom of that first child was to zip her up and snug her in. And I started to raise that zipper. We got about halfway up. And then it just wouldn't go any further. But I'm a mom. Yay for moms. I know what you do. You hold the top of the zipper and you hold the bottom of the zipper, straighten that zipper out, and you keep going. So because my sister and my friend was there and all of the aunties, because that's what you do with the first child, one held it on the top, one held it on the bottom, and I kept going with the zipper, except the zipper actually didn't want to keep going. And my daughter looked at me and she said, Mom, don't break the zipper. And I said, girl, I'm a mom. I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. And then you know what happened. I kept tugging on that zipper and the zipper broke. This is one of those proms where you can't get there late. If you get there late, they lock the doors. So we're freaking out because we don't have another zipper. We don't have time to put another zipper in there. And then because I'm the mom, I came up with a plan. I don't sew with a machine, but my mother did teach me with a needle and thread how to sew on a button. So I just took a needle and thread and sewed her in the dress. Because I'm a mom. That's what we do. She was a little concerned. She said, but Mom, I'm going to a prom. I'm going to be gone for 5 or 6 hours. What if I need to get out of the dress? At this moment, I was happy. I had sewed her in the dress. Baby, there's no need for you to worry about getting out of the dress. Hold it until you get home. She went out. She had the time of her life. Unplanned, unscripted, a solution we never even knew we would have to come up with. It did not get in the way of her enjoying her night. And years later, we tell that story of how my mom sewed me in a dress. In the moment, it was devastating because she had plans, and this kink in her zipper threatened to destroy her plans. But her mom had other plans for her, plans that we hadn't planned for. But in that moment, those plans still allowed her to live out her dream for that evening. Often in life, we have kinks. We have things that are uncomfortable, things that are unplanned, things that threaten to destroy what we expect to happen. And in the lives of many of the moms who you meet and who you serve, the unplanned pregnancy is definitely a kink. But God is a great dad. And often, the plans that he has for us, the solutions that he creates for us in the middle of our kinks, actually shift our lives in such a way where there is still good, because Romans 8:28 tells us that God uses all things for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. That means the mom who is facing the unplanned pregnancy, and that even means you. In your life, in this season, I know there have been many kinks. Can I just say, what if, in the middle of the kinks of this season, the grief that you have personally faced, the struggles that you have personally met with, the difficulties that you have had to persevere through, whether those were personal or in the centers that you serve in, what if even in those kinks, God is a good dad for you and has plans for you in the middle of those difficulties to do in you and through you what eyes have not seen, what ears have not heard, and only what he knows he has planned for those who love him. I want to encourage you that in the most difficult of times for you as you serve, for you as you're called, for you as you honor God with your gifting and your passions, wherever you are, that as you face kinks, difficulties, and challenges, that God has a plan for those kinks of yours too. I have lots of kinks. I would love for my children to be perfectly behaved, but kink, they're human beings. I would love to be the perfect size, whatever that even is, but there's a kink. There's this thing called chocolate, and I love it. I would love for my home to always be in order and for things to always be in their place, but there's a kink, actually a few of them. I have people who live there. Life has kinks. What if I did not, despite the kinks of my kids, serve them anyway? I would be forfeiting the beauty of family and the faithfulness of motherhood and the sovereignty and serenity of what that does in time. If I did not choose to enjoy my life, honestly, y'all, at any size that I am, then I would be choosing big seasons of my life not to have a good time. And if I chose to be angry and frustrated at my people all the time because of the underwear that is still underneath my couch as I walked out of the door to come here, I would miss out on the opportunities, yes, to work and yes, to clean, but yes, to have fun. Kinks are hard, but they shouldn't get in the way of you moving forward. So don't be too distracted or discouraged by your kinks. There was a man who was sick of going to work every day while his wife merely stayed home. Somebody say merely. I'm a church girl. I need y'all to talk back to me. He wanted her to see what he was going through, so he prayed, "Dear Lord, I go to work every day, and I put in 8 hours while my wife stays home. I want her to know what I go through. So please create a trade in our bodies." And God, in his infinite wisdom, granted his request. So the next morning, sure enough, the man awoke as a woman. He arose, he cooked breakfast for his mate, he woke up the kids, he set out their school clothes, he fed them breakfast, he packed their lunches, he drove them to school, he came home and picked up the dry cleaning, took it to the cleaner, stopped at the bank to draw money out. Then he decided to pay the bills, and he wanted to make sure he did that in person, so he drove there to the power company and the phone company. Then he went grocery shopping, came home and put away the groceries. He cleaned the cat litter box and bathed the dogs, and then it was already 1 p.m. and he hurried to make the beds, do the laundry, vacuum, dust, sweep, and mop the floor. He's doing more than I ever do in a day, but whatever. He ran to the school to pick up the kids. He got into an argument with one of them on his way home. He set out the cookies and milk and got the kids ready to do their homework, and then he got out the ironing board and watched some TV while he did the ironing. At 4:30, he began to peel the potatoes and wash the greens for salad, breading the chops and snapping the peas for supper. After supper, he cleaned the kitchen, ran the dishwasher, folded the laundry, bathed the kids, and put them to bed. At 9 p.m., he was exhausted And though his chores weren't finished, he went to bed where he was expected to make love, which he managed to get through without complaint. The next morning, he woke up and he immediately knelt by the bed and he said, Lord, I do not know what I was thinking. I was wrong to envy my wife's ability to be a stay-at-home homemaker. Please, oh please, trade us back. The Lord in his infinite wisdom replied, my son, I feel like you've learned your lesson. I will be happy to change things back to the way they once were. But you're going to have to wait 9 months because you got pregnant last night. What is a kink for you could be catastrophe for someone else. What if your kinks, the load, the difficulty, the challenges that God has allowed for you, he knows that you can handle it, and he knows that as you proceed and persevere, that your ability through his strength to handle the kinks he's given you are because as you do so, it's a light. Have you ever considered that the kinks you carry, that the burden that you are walking with right now, he knows is simply a part of the story you'll tell one day? We all have a story. And we know from what we watch on TV or YouTube or the people that you enjoy listening to when they speak or the books that you enjoy reading, we all know that story is what sucks us in and makes us listen. And often the stories that we are the most encouraged by, motivated by, inspired by are the stories of overcoming when someone had to deal with hard difficulty in the darkness, and they kept going, and we see what God did in them. And we're glad that they persevered through their kinks. We're glad that they held all the things that are hard. We're glad that they kept going one step at a time, no matter how hard it was, because their story inspires us. There are people that are going to come behind you and who are going to say to you one day, I counseled that girl. I spent time with her. I poured out my heart. I prayed for her. I met with her so many times. And she still decided not to have her baby. And they're going to be distraught. And because you have been through that same situation and you know that feeling, you're going to be able to tell someone behind you with your perspective, not only to share empathy to their pain, but also to say, I get it. Now let me give you some perspective. Because you were overseeing a center that closed, so you went and you gave your time, your talents, and your ability to yet another. When the leader of that center is struggling in hard times, you will, with empathy, be able to share your story of how, even though maybe your center's closing still stings, it enabled you to shift and serve somewhere else. And you'll encourage that leader to keep going. And they'll believe you because they know you understand. What if your weight, your burden, is the beginning of your light? And what if the only way you strike the match of your light to be a blessing in someone else's darkness is if you persevere? I want to encourage you today to persevere, to keep going, and to be focused on what God has given you to do. I'm a really practical person, and I always want to make sure that anytime I share that I give something practical that you can walk away with and say, if nothing else, I know that I can do at least these couple of things and maybe get to what Chrystal was trying to tell me about. I don't want you to just be encouraged or inspired. I want you to be able to put your finger on something and say, okay, let me do this as a result. Often, when we are burdened and when we are bearing the weight of our own kinks in our own lives, when we're walking through what we don't feel is the best of times, it's giving birth to the hardest of times, but when we just have to get through it, I want you to understand one thing before I give you a clue and a hint of something that may be helpful for you to do. God sees, He knows, and He cares. He sees, He knows, and He cares. One of the things I love about the psalmist David is he, on the one hand, through the Psalms, the longest book of the Bible, would be frustrated, angry, upset, emotional, and then in the very next chapter, he would say something good. He would say, Psalm 38:10, my heart throbs, my strength fails me, the light of my eyes, even that is gone. Psalm 55:5, fear and trembling come upon me, horror has overwhelmed me. Psalm 73:26, my flesh and my heart fail. Psalm 40:12, for evils beyond number have surrounded me. He did not hold back on his emotional sharing with God. But he said in Psalm 142:3, when my heart is overwhelmed within me, you know my path. God orders your steps, you know. So yeah, be honest, cry out, share your own challenges with those who care for you. But at the end of the day, God has a plan and a path for you personally, Jeremiah 29:11. And when you can't see what comes next, He can see. One step at a time. Keep doing what He's called you to do. Jesus had a lot to do. We are told in Hebrews that He's not a high priest who can't be touched with our suffering. He actually came to earth, put on skin, and lived through some hard stuff. And while He was here, think about it, He had 33 years to be born, live a perfect life, get some disciples together that could spread the message of His coming afterwards. And then He was going to die, and He knew He was going to die at 33. That's a lot to get done in such a short period of time. And in that period of time, there were crowds that would come upon Him to teach. There were people that wanted healing. There were folks who wanted to talk to Him. There were people who had questions. He wanted to visit with the children. There was a lot of demand on His time, the short amount of time that He had to do what God called Him, His Father had called Him to do. And yet and still, He made room for what was most important. He made room, not for everything, but for what He knew He was called to do. I often think in Luke chapter 8, when Jesus was walking through a crowd of people, and the woman with the issue of blood came to Him, crawled on the ground through the crowd just to touch His garment, when He said, who touched me? In a crowd of people pressing on you. Even His disciples said, nobody touched you. There's a lot of people around you. And He said, oh no, I notice when power goes out. How does a person who has to be born and live a perfect life and do all the things and heal people and teach people and meet with the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin and guide disciples and make friends and meet with the children, how does he notice when power goes out? Because he was paying attention to the most important things. In your life, as you serve, burnout is real. You still have, for many of you, your families, your ministry, your church, your work, your community, your bills. And if Jesus, in 33 years, with all that he had to do, noticed the small thing, not only noticing the small thing, but when he noticed the woman, he stopped to look at her. There were crowds of people around him, pressing in on him. But he noticed the one woman he was called to talk to that day individually. You have to live your life paying attention. I don't want you to be burned out and unnecessarily burdened because you are adding to a load that God never intended for you to carry. And how do you know? 4 things. Space, silence, solitude, and Sabbath rest. Space, silence, solitude, and Sabbath rest. What Jesus also did was give us a great example of doing those things. As one of the busiest men alive, with one of the shortest lives lived, he often went away, creating space between him and people who were pulling at him, being willing to be by himself, being quiet in prayer, and going to sleep on a boat in the middle of a storm, putting his head on a pillow and getting some rest. Can I encourage you to get some rest? The pull on you emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, when you are serving and pouring out for life indeed, is real. And the tendency is, because I understand lives are at stake, for you to run harder, run faster, do more, and do more of it in a shorter period of time. And there is a place for hard work, and there is a place for pouring out, and there is a place for extending yourself. But I want you to know that if you are trying to do more than Jesus, you might want to reconsider your philosophy of work and service. Even those who work hard, who serve hard, need room for space, silence, solitude, and Sabbath rest. Why? So that way in all the sea of all the people, of all the women, of all the stories that you can serve, you know which ones you are supposed to respond to. How do you know? Because when you are rested, when you are filled, when you are refueled, you see clearer. Yes, balance your burdens. Yes, persevere through your kinks. Yes, know that the best of times often are born in the hardest of times. But I also want to give you permission to rest, to receive, to absorb, to cry out, to listen, and to share the load. And to get that clarity of what you do next when life and seasons are hard, you've got to create some space. God can do more in you when you have room to receive from Him than you can do in your own strength. One of the hallmarks of people of faith is that we start out in faith and then we keep going by the strength of our own function. And we forget that we are utilized as servants, but it doesn't all depend on us, even for His purposes. I promise you that if you do what God has asked you to do the way He's called you to do it, He will sustain you. And if there comes a time when you can't do it, He will supply. Notice the small things. Be able to pay attention to really what He's called you to, and create the space, solitude, silence, and Sabbath rest so that you can hear and see clearly. I love so many things that I've heard today, and I understand that many of the pregnancy centers that are represented here are strategically positioned by the Lord to present life and light in darkness. But we would be foolish to believe that there aren't people here today that are simply burnt out. I want you to know that yes, your actions matter. The long hours, the phone calls, the counseling, the balancing of the budget, the organizing of supplies, all the things that no one sees that you do, the ways that you support, the checks that you write anonymously. But I also want you to know that this is hard work, but it's also God's work. the burden that he's given you to carry, persevere, but listen, feel the touch on the garment, and know when it's time to pay attention to you. You are not a bad person for having Sabbath rest from your service. It's okay. I also want you to know that when you have no choice but to keep going and to do what you know God has called you to do in this season, because it's a season of pressing, that he will sustain you there too. Here's what I know. You would not be in this room today if you were not committed to this cause. But the God who called you is committed too. And ultimately, all you're doing is shining the light he's put in you. I still, to this day, get asked by so many people, how did you do that? Whether it was my 19-year-old teen mom situation, my 20-year-old, oh my gosh, I hate my job situation, my 30-year-old, oh my goodness, nobody sees me in the darks and the depths of this wonderful children dungeon, or my 40s, where really, truly, everything that I saw on that spreadsheet was red. In the middle of those dark seasons, I don't even know how the next step happened. What I know I did was take one step at a time. My mom said to me in that 30-year-old season, you need to take a nap. I said, you don't understand. When they nap is the only time I can get anything done. And she said, yeah, but a rested mom is better than a burnt out mom. And those things that you're working on, they will still be there when you wake up. Yes, the seasons are challenging, and yes, the seasons are difficult, and yes, I believe that God has equipped you for where he's called you, and yes, encouragement to the pressing and being the light in the darkness. But I also want to say, as you work through the seasons that God has called you to, every now and then, take 5, and trust that when you do that, that God can fill in the gaps. I love that you're here today. I love that you're here to support one another, and I love that you're here to further learn how you can continue to do what you're doing in a wonderful way. And I want you to know that just your presence and commitment to being here is your calling to be a light. It confirms your light in the dark. And I hope that you hear from one mom who had someone else say to her, Chrystal, in 10 years, this will be a story. And that woman, out of her story, felt me tug on her garment. She was busy. She had a life. And I knew her story, a little bit of it. And I just said, can I ask you a question? She told me her story. And then she said, here's what you need to remember. In 10 years, this will be your story. You'll be fine. That was the only conversation I ever had with that woman about her story or about what I should do. That one little thing was a light. Whatever little you feel like you're offering in this season, however burnt out you feel like you are, trust that the little offering that you offer to God for what you're doing here is enough. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. The light, a little light will do. God bless.